What AREMA has done for me is it has really gotten me in the door at first when I was a student. It allowed me to get my bearings on the technical side, decide which areas I wanted to focus my career in before I even got started. And now, as a professional, the technical collaboration, getting the best practices from other folks who are doing the same things that I'm doing is invaluable.
You may know the American Railway Engineering and Maintenance of Way Association, or AREMA, as the, quote, keepers of the manuals. You may know them as the, quote, people behind the largest annual railroad conference in North America. Heck, you may not know about AREMA at all. This podcast is designed, no pun intended, to change your view of who AREMA is and how AREMA has changed the trajectory of many railway careers over its 100-plus year history. Welcome to Platform Chats with your host, Walt Bleser, where he takes a moment to discuss the impacts AREMA has had on the very people who are proud to be called members. Are you ready to roll with AREMA?
This episode is brought to you by Unabridged Structures. Unabridged Structures provides mentorship and advisement to emerging technologies and early-stage companies focused on infrastructure. They have a proven track record of bringing technology solutions to the railway industry. For more on Unabridged Structures, go to unabridgedstructures.com.
Welcome back to AREMA's Platform Chats. I am your host, Walt Bleser, and we have made it. We have made it out of the winter months, the spring months, and into the summer months. The heat wave has hit Denver this week, and it's just kind of wild to think that we're on episode number 5. We have had guests that range from chief bridge engineers to we've had a double guest on our last episode about the environmental committee and their resurgence. And I know I say this every week, every single time that I'm excited, but this time I'm super stoked to have a fellow Colorado resident on today's podcast. We are not in the same room, but we are in the same state. So this is the closest I've ever gotten to any of my guests. And today is Gio DiDomenico. Gio is a track engineer with Kiewit Engineering, and he is actually what we would consider to be a rare bird in this state. He is a native, not a transplant like me. Not to get too deep into the native versus transplants in Colorado, because this is the AREMA podcast, but Gio is rare because he's from Pueblo, and he left and went to school in Champaign, but he quickly came back. So Gio, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you so close. And what did make you leave? I know sounds like you grew up in Pueblo, yeah? And then you...
Yeah, that's right. I grew up in Pueblo. I spent most of my childhood not even knowing that TTCI was out there or anything about the rail industry at all. And I left just to go to grad school at University of Illinois and stuck around for a little bit because my wife's family is in the Chicago area, and we made our way back here eventually. So
wait a second. So your wife is from the Chicago area, but somehow you convinced her to come here.
we actually met at Colorado State up in Fort Collins, and
Okay.
so we did a little trade, went by her family for a little bit, and we both love it in Colorado, so we came back.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm glad you were able to come back here. There's obviously lots to do here in the outdoors. And yeah, a little bit about your family. You've got a wife. Do you have any children?
I do. Yeah, I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old daughter and a almost 2-year-old son, and we live here in the south suburbs of Denver.
All right. Well, if they're 4 and 2, they should be skiing like crazy for sure, right?
Unfortunately, they're not. We have not gone a single time with either of them.
All right. Well,
We need to step that up.
yeah, I was going to say on behalf of everybody that sits in this state, please step that up. I've got a kid that's almost 2, and we're going to make sure he is ripping this winter. So let's talk about the rail industry. Let's talk about how a guy like you in Pueblo, where they're making rail, and frankly, Pueblo is an extremely historic rail town, especially in this state. It was the gateway to the west before we had the Moffat Tunnel system. not to get overly into the former world of history. Is that what got you excited about the rail industry, or what got you what made you even know it existed?
Yeah, so my background is in civil engineering, and my parents were in the water resources field for their career. And so I kind of followed in the footsteps of my dad and went down the civil path with an interest in water resources. And then, kind of midway through undergrad, I um, I took an internship down in Denver and started riding RTD a bunch, and took it to work every day and started to kind of see how important it is to people every day who use it and who rely on it. And so I kind of decided to explore that as an alternative path. So I got in touch with some folks at RTD. They let me shadow them around for a day or two, showed me what they work on, some of the track folks, some of the systems folks, the OCS folks. And I decided to kind of completely change my path and focus more on transportation. And to try to get my foot in the door, I didn't have luck capitalizing on some of the expansion that was going on in Denver at the time. I was a little late graduating in 2013. So I decided to go get a master's degree at Railtech where I could learn something formally about the railroad, education wise, and then hopefully that would lead to some other opportunities in the industry.
And so, for our listeners, rail tech, what is that?
So Railtech is a program within the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Railtech is an acronym. It stands for the Rail Transportation and Engineering Center, and it's currently run by Dr. Christopher Barkin and a handful of other very smart folks who have a good mix of academic and industry experience. And so they have a whole slate of railroad engineering courses. They offer a Master of Science. I think now they have a bachelor's program as well that's kind of like a certificate that gets bolted on. And they do a lot of railway research. So a lot of research in the realm of railway safety, uh, railway operations, and then also on the infrastructure side, they do a lot of testing with fastening systems, concrete ties, things like that.
Okay, so they have a large research arm as well, and I assume, and maybe I shouldn't assume, but Dr. Hay, yeah, that was an Illinois Champaign guy.
Yep, he is no longer around, but he was the founder of, I guess, the predecessor program to Railtech. Yeah.
Okay, so he left quite the legacy, is my understanding. I know there's still the Hay Award within
Yep,
AREMA every year.
absolutely. And his book is kind of like the, at least for track engineers, it's one of the major references. So
Okay. Well, I guess one other question I have along those lines is: did you have an AREMA student chapter? How did you get exposed to AREMA
yeah.
at a young age?
So while I was at U of I, they had an AREMA student chapter that was very active, and so that was my first exposure to AREMA at all. My first fall, they wrangled everybody up who was doing a master's degree and a whole bunch of undergrads as well, and we all went to the annual meeting. I think it was in Indianapolis that year. And so that was my first exposure at all. Had a great time, sat in some of the committee meetings to see what it was all about. And the following year, I served as the student chapter vice president and brought in a bunch of industry speakers to our student chapter. And after that, I've just been involved ever since in various capacities as I became a professional. I joined some committees and, followed kind of a typical professional path in AREMA.
So the student chapter, what kind of experience, or I guess what is the interaction? I guess is the better word, with the main AREMA group. That is actually something that is very foreign to me. I was not in an AREMA chapter when I was in college. If you're talking right now, you're listening to, or if there's someone listening to this podcast that is in college and they have that student chapter, what kind of exposure does it give you to AREMA?
Yeah, so AREMA provides a bunch of support for the student chapter throughout the year. They they provide some financial support, some support for students to come to the conference at a heavily discounted rate, and they also provide some support for making contacts and bringing in folks from the industry to give technical presentations or field visits, things like that. And then the main exposure to AREMA as a whole happens at the annual meeting. And some of you might know, there's a large student program that happens at the annual meeting, and they have the Meet the Next Generation event where college students are mingling at a career fair type setting with industry professionals. And that's honestly the best resource, I think, for a student who's interested in the railway industry is that one career fair at the Meet the Next Generation event.
I was going to say that national, or the national meeting, if that's what I'm going to call it, the big one, the big conference,
Mhm.
is. I mean, it's got to be somewhat overwhelming. I mean, I'm listening to you. You were talking about being a water resources engineer, and then you're writing RTD, and you're like, you know what? I think I like rail and transportation. Next thing you know, you're at the largest railway conference in North America. Uh, I do know the Meet the Next Generation. Does it allow you to go into the expo too and see all the displays, or no?
Yeah, yeah. The way that we did it, we attended the conference pretty much like a normal attendee. We had the ability to go sit in committee meetings as student members and guests to the committee and go through the exhibit hall and all of that stuff. So it's a
Oh
great
wow.
way to really quickly figure out all the different ways that you could be involved in the railway industry.
Yeah, so you could sit through the technical tracks too
Hmm.
and quickly figure out how boring the structures one is, right?
Yeah, and get really into the track stuff.
Get into the track stuff. Okay, yeah, I get you. And then you can go and look at all the different displays and stuff. That's awesome. I actually did not know any of that. So, boy, if you were in college and you had access to an AREMA student chapter, and then that got you access to an AREMA meeting, that could really help
Yeah,
craft.
absolutely.
Now, you were a graduate student, though, right? Is this open to undergrads?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Just so long as your school has an AREMA student chapter, then you're plugged in that way. But I do believe there are other ways for students that don't have an AREMA student chapter established at their school to make it to the conference as well.
Okay. And then you graduated when?
I finished my bachelor's at Colorado State in 2013 and graduated from U of I in 2015.
Okay. 2015. So when you graduate, then you can't become a full member yet, correct? Even though had exposure as a student, it doesn't give you any credit for that.
That's right. You start the clock when you start working as an associate member, and you work for 3 years, and then you can apply to be a full member on your full membership and serve as a voting member on committees and things like that.
Okay, so you out of school quickly became an associate member. I did the same thing, and then you spent 3 years, which I think the associate membership really, for me, the biggest thing is you can't vote on letter ballot material. I can't remember if there's much other differences there. But okay, so you were the student member, then associate, then became a full member in 18. So when you were an associate member, were you going to different AREMA committee meetings, or how did you figure out which technical committee you wanted to join?
I sort of had an idea while I was a student member because I floated between some of the committees that I was focused on in my research at U of I. So I think for a while I was attending the High Speed Rail Committee and the Environmental Committee. My research as a grad student focused on passenger rail energy efficiency and emissions. So I hung out with the Environmental Committee for a little bit and presented a few of my research papers to them. And then once I started working, I changed it up to to align more with what I was doing at work, so I joined track and transit, and I've been there ever since I started working.
Okay. So did you meet our friends Leo and Carrie over there on 13?
I can't recall if I did at that time, but
Okay.
I imagine so. I would have met them somewhere between 2013 and 15, yeah.
Yeah, when you were presenting. Cool. Okay. Well, boy, all paths seem to lead back to 13 now that I've had this exposure to the environmental committee. That's funny. Okay. So which committee did you end up joining, and what are you most active in?
Yeah, right now I'm on Committee 5, which is track, and Committee 12, which is transit, and I'm fairly active in both of them. I'm the vice chair of the design geometry subcommittee on 5, and that's a lot of the stuff that I do day to day kind of fits into that realm, design geometry and alignment. And on transit, um, I work on some of their ad hoc tasks and just try to get myself plugged in as much as I can as a early careers guy. The committees, they really just need people who are willing to volunteer some time, and nothing's too crazy complex or anything like that. So an early careers guy like me fits in perfect in just helping out with stuff that they need hands for.
And that's a great transition. I've had a lot of, to put it nicely, so we've had some later careers guys that are been on the podcast, and they've been talking about the history and what they've seen. I was super excited to get you on here because now I've got someone that's on the earlier side of their career and get the perspective of someone that's doesn't have 20, 30, 40 years of experience. So do you find the technical committees welcoming, or was it difficult to get on or intimidating? I'd love to hear your perspective. Even though you were a student, so you had a little bit of an early exposure, I'd love to hear your perspective of joining one. If you're talking to someone right now, let's just say is under the age of 30, they're thinking about joining one of these committees. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, my advice would be just to jump in with both feet and show up to one of the committee meetings at the annual meeting that you're interested in, and sit through, see what sorts of things they're working on at the moment, and then I would submit an application. I think the application process is the same no matter what level you're at. You basically submit your resume and sort of a letter of interest to the committee, and you can join uh, two of them at a time, um, and that's kind of where they limit you. And just all the committees are, just looking for folks who are interested in volunteering and willing to put in some work. So you don't have to be an expert in your field yet by any means. A lot of the work, there's going to be somebody who's got a lot of experience that's willing to guide you along and help you, and they really just need folks that are ready to put in some volunteer time to keep progressing the manual of railway engineering.
So you could be an EIT. You don't have to be a PE. I know you're a PE, but I don't think that's a requirement, is it?
No, not at all. No, I was helping out on stuff as an EIT, and
Okay.
you know
Yeah, that's I
getting right
think
into the technical stuff. So it's a good way to get exposure to other folks that are working, to network, but it's also a good way to, you know, sort of be on, I don't want to say the cutting edge, but in some ways, as you're updating the manual, it is, making the AREMA manual reflect the best practices that are out there. So you get
yeah.
to be a part of the technical conversation as well.
Absolutely. Would you say you found any mentors? I'd love to hear any stories about that through your last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I have, especially as a student member, I found that AREMA was an awesome place to find mentors. There were quite a few people actually that I just kind of reached out to after meeting them at the first conference, who were willing to talk to me on the phone as I was finishing up my degree, send me resources to read about. At one point I was trying to decide if I was going to be more interested in track, or maybe I was interested in OCS design. And so there are some folks who were more than happy to be my mentor over the phone, long distance, and kind of send me stuff to read about and help me make those decisions. And then since I became a working professional, Um, I've tried to flip the script a little bit, and AREMA has a mentorship program that's kind of formally set up where um, students or early careers professionals can apply to be assigned a mentor. And I've helped a few younger students out in that process as well.
I was not aware of that. So let's talk a little bit about that mentorship program. Well, let's look at that from two ways. How does someone like me get involved if I want to mentor younger folks? Number one, and then if you could explain how does someone find a mentor? I was
Yeah,
unaware of that.
there's just a general site on the AREMA webpage, and I think there's a spot for mentees who are interested in finding a mentor to apply, and vice versa. And then there are a group of folks that pair people together and make the connection happen.
Okay. Have how many people have you mentored?
I think I've gone through the process with two folks so far. Yeah, one was a student and one was an early careers professional, kind of like me.
And did they stick around, or did you scare them away?
No, I think they're both still in the industry, so I have
Success.
a good track record so far.
Oh man, we had to get the term track record in this podcast. I'm glad it was you that said it, not me. So thank you for that.
Yep, of
Uh,
course. No shortage of railway puns.
no, not at all. I love puns. How about the young professionals program at AREMA? What is that, and how do people get involved with that?
Yeah, so the Young Professionals program at the annual meeting sort of evolved from some things that I was doing on the side. So when I worked in Chicago with a few consulting firms, and while I was there, my friend Joe Olson, who works at STV, and I kind of were talking and brainstorming, and we saw a lot of people who worked at our firms in other disciplines who had, I guess I would call them local units of their respective professional organizations in Chicago. So, for example, ASCE, huge organization, they have ASCE Chicago, ASCE Denver, local units that get together outside of the larger annual meeting for networking opportunities, professional development, things like that. So, we wanted to start something analogous to that with AREMA. And so what we ended up starting was a young professionals group called Chicago Young Rail Professionals. And we met for sort of happy hours and networking opportunities like that for a while. And we reached out to the AREMA staff and asked what they thought of this idea of having local units of AREMA or local young professionals groups that were kind of similar to the student chapters. And they liked the idea and started to plug it into the annual conference program. So I think the first young professionals program at the conference happened in 2018, I believe, or maybe it was 2017. And uh, the staff at AREMA organized that, and they programmed in some time for us to spend all together and provided some drink coupons for everybody, and we all just kind of got to know folks who were early careers from all the different firms across the country. And the last couple of years, it has gotten a little bit bigger. We've done a panel last year where we had some folks who were on the senior side of the career spectrum who had been deeply involved in AREMA on the panel. And this year, we're going to flip it a little bit, and we're going to have some successful early careers folks from the railway industry on the panel. So to get involved in that, I think all you got to do is check a box when you register for the annual meeting that you're interested in the Young Professionals program, and it's one of the time slots that's programmed into the schedule.
Okay. Well, you had me at drink coupons.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so
Unfortunately, they're not as useful in the virtual conference environment, but someday when we get back to in person,
yeah. During the virtual conference, I just have my wife give me a drink coupon, and then I can go down to the fridge if I want to.
yeah.
Uh, so Okay, so let's look forward to 2022, which is the next time we'll be in person. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're in Denver.
Yes, we're in Denver.
And my understanding is that they're doing that specifically for this podcast. They planned this years ago. They knew this was coming. They knew there was an opportunity to come to the host's hometown, and I
Oh,
appreciate that.
I thought they just did it because they like me and wanted me to be close to home for 1 year.
I think yes, they were the AREMA professionals were both concerned with our marital status, so I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yep. Uh, okay, well we just got off track there, and there's another pun, but we'll come back on here. So it looks like when you came back to Colorado, you started the Colorado Rail Professionals group. Yeah, when did you start that?
So right when I moved, I just after I had to abandon the group in Chicago, I started something very similar here. We dropped the young professionals uh, and kind of opened it up to everyone who was working in the rail industry, mostly because I was afraid that we just wouldn't have as many people involved in the industry here in Chicago. It's a lot bigger pool of folks working. So, and that's a similar type of organization where so far in 2019 we had 4 or 5 happy hours, and we just kind of try to meet uh, in locations that might be convenient for folks to travel to us who are not maybe in the Denver metro area. And then COVID came, and we didn't have any meetings during the main portion of the pandemic, but we're starting back up in just 10 days, I think, with our first one since 2019.
Yeah, I think I got the email. It's the 17th.
Yeah. And my hope is with that to expand it from the networking, social type outings to provide a little bit more professional development opportunities. So we're hoping in the fall to maybe have a technical presentation from one of the members, or eventually maybe a field visit to a local project.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. So, is there a network of these young professional group or across the country? Are you franchising this idea?
Trying to, so far, I think we have them established in Chicago, Colorado, and I think there's one in Montreal
Oh,
that somebody, a friend, liked the idea at the conference and started their own in Montreal where she was working.
okay. All right. Well, if you're listening to this and you would like to start a young professionals, or heck, if you want to include old people like me and you just want to do a rail professionals group, please reach out to Gio, and they can find Gio. Well, actually, if you're an AREMA member, you can just go to the AREMA membership directory and find him pretty quick. So let me shift gears here a little bit. I noticed that you also are a P-Eng, not just a PE. So what is your Canadian connection there?
The connection comes from just working on a handful of projects in Canada so far throughout my career, and my company just happens to be pursuing a few large transit projects up that way, or currently working on one in Ottawa as well. And so I got the credential to sort of help our company go after some of that work.
Okay. All right. So that's all right. So it was all business related. I thought there might be a more interesting story behind it, but maybe for another time.
Yeah, unfortunately not. Just mostly, you know, dipping my toes in some of the Canadian projects.
There you go. All right. Well, here I'm going to do this. I do this every time. I do it for every guest. If I've got a young professional, say under 35, sitting in their cube at a massive consulting firm, they're looking at transportation, they're looking at working on highways. Why would you tell them to join AREMA, and what advice would you have for them to help them define their career path? It's a deep one, so take it as you wish.
Yeah, I think that if you are involved in any way in the rail industry or interested in switching gears from highways or anything else, and you're interested in rail and transit, AREMA is going to be the best resource for you to establish a flourishing career in the railway industry. And I would just, I think if you're a first timer, I would recommend trying to find a way to the annual meeting and get plugged into the committees and explore all the options that they've got. Because what AREMA has done for me is it has really gotten me in the door at first when I was a student. It allowed me to get my bearings on the technical side, decide which areas I wanted to focus my career in before I even got started. And now, as a professional, the technical collaboration, getting the best practices from other folks who are doing the same things that I'm doing is invaluable. Uh, I really like this young professionals program that the AREMA staff has started, and getting to help out with that, getting early careers folks plugged in to the industry is super rewarding. And there are ample opportunities to do something similar like that at AREMA between the Young Professionals Program, Committee 24, who's working on all of the educational and outreach opportunities in the railway industry. So that's a very rewarding part about being involved. And then, frankly, just the networking opportunities. I mean, I think as you go along your career, it's good to know folks who are experienced, who have worked in consulting, who have worked for the railroad, who have worked for the contractor or the supplier. You know, you can really take control of your career and steer it the way that you want when you know this wide array of professionals from attending the conference year after year. So I think it's the best opportunity for somebody who wants to jump right in at the beginning of your career or wants to switch gears later. AREMA is going to supercharge your ability to do that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's very well said. And how about from a time commitment? I've heard that concern before of how many meetings per year. I know committee 7 for me. We meet twice a year. Some committees meet 3 times a year. Is that a concern for you, or what committees requirements do you have?
Yeah, both of my committees try to meet twice per year. They do the annual meeting, and then we try to have a spring meeting. Um, Before the pandemic, the spring meeting was always in person. Uh, Everybody did their best to make it. You know, I think that everybody understands that depending on your employer's policies, that it might be difficult to make it to everything that's going on in person. But I think that depending on how involved you are, you can make the case to your employer that it's worth the trip, and you're contributing enough to the ongoing committee work that it's worth it. Or a lot of times a virtual option is provided and you can still attend from your desk, especially now that we've gotten really good at that kind of thing. And as far as time commitment for the actual tasks that have each committee has ongoing, I think it's as much as you want to put into it. Like I said before, at least on my committees, we're always looking for volunteers who just are willing to put in a few volunteer hours to push a task along or review a section of the manual to make sure that it's all up to date, things like that. And so it's as much as you want to volunteer and raise your hand for.
I agree, and I think you're going to get out of it what you put into it,
Hmm.
based on what you just said. So, okay, fantastic. Well, I got to say, you've been a great guest. You're sound like you're quite the cheerleader for AREMA, and when I was talking to the AREMA headquarters folks about potential podcast guests, your name was near the top of the list, and you didn't disappoint. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate everything you've done, frankly, for the organization. And uh, I think it's our job as members and leaders in the organization to keep people engaged and get them excited about coming to the meetings, and it's equally beneficial for them to do so. So thank you so much, Gio. And frankly, it sounds like I'm going to see you in person potentially here on June 17th, because I'm going to try to make your Colorado Rail Professionals.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that'd be great to see you there. Hopefully, we can kick 2021 off with a bang and keep the momentum going with that group. So, thanks for inviting me to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me. This was great. And I'm absolutely kind of an AREMA fanboy, so I will, AREMA has done a lot for my career, and I'll continue to give back as much as I can because I think that it's a great organization.
I don't know if you should have said you're an AREMA fanboy, because I'm not going to let that one go. So I
Hey,
appreciate it.
I just speak the truth.
All right, Gio. Thanks again for coming on the podcast, and we'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for rolling with AREMA on today's episode of Platform Chats. For further information about AREMA, please visit arema.org or contact us at info@arema.org.